Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. It's now almost 12 months since the formal creation of the 21 community rehabilitation companies and the establishment of the new National Probation Services. Since then, it's become clear that the fundamental flaws in the former Secretary of State's thinking are beginning to impact upon service delivery. The CRCs were initially created to address new work arising from probation supervision being extended to clients leaving prison after serving less than 12 months in custody. The probation service supported extending statutory support to this group with adequate funding. Had a consultation taken place around how this could be best achieved, then I have no doubt that genuine alternative methods could have emerged. But it was unfortunately evident from the outset that the current Secretary of State's predecessor was fixed upon the payment by results outsourcing model. Mr. Chairman, prior to the reorganisation, probation trusts were highly successful, with a good record of reducing reoffending. They had won European-wide awards for public service, and all of the trusts had been recognised as either good or outstanding by recent inspections. In particular, trusts had established good local partnerships with other agencies, including the private sector, that had been producing excellent results. In a number of trusts, e.g. West Mercia and the Willowdean Project, these partnerships had extended into innovative work with the third sector, addressing and supporting the same group of clients that the TR reorganisation targeted. Indeed, a major review by the Third Sector Review Group indicates that they believe the procurement process was incoherent and meant that third sector providers who were supposed to have opportunities to engage in TR were disenfranchised. Yes, I will give way.
Does he share my concern that it's not simply our opinion as politicians, but the voluntary organisations themselves? And of course, we are all aware that the National Council for Voluntary Organisations has actually sent out a briefing for this very session, which made the point that despite the warm words of the former Justice Secretary, there's very little voluntary sector involvement.
My honourable friend makes an excellent point, and that is indeed the whole purpose, really, of a consultation, is to listen to the experts. And those experts have, in this case, indeed described themselves as being used as bid candy, literally just being used to dress up the bids and not being involved in a truly engaged fashion. And I agree entirely with my honourable friend's point. A number of significant challenges were immediately obvious, Mr. Chairman. Firstly, the marketplace was not interested in taking over the management of high-risk offenders for the limited profits associated with managing that target group. Further, the MOJ had been heavily criticised by both the PAC and the NAO for their poor management of previous contracts in courts, community payback, electronic monitoring, and the quality of some provision in private prisons and detention centres. There was therefore limited political support for privatising the whole lot, hence the split solution. A number of probation experts argued that splitting the probation service into two distinct groups was a far riskier solution than actually selling all of the service to private providers. The split in the service creates challenges, some of which, with great patience, effort and commitment from all stakeholders, could be managed. But a world full of goodwill will not address the insurmountable structural flaws arising from the split, including, but not limited to, local service delivery and management of clients, bureaucracy and inefficiency with additional processes generated to manage the allocation of cases and accountability, substandard internal communications, especially founded upon outdated and unstable technology within NOMS, inefficient management of staff due to internal competition which undermines morale and professional unity. However, the greatest flaw was rushing the whole programme through to meet a strict political timetable without any adequate testing or piloting. The MOJ also failed to establish workable, sustainable contracts with the CRCs. These are already the subject of significant challenge from the new CRC owners. Equally, in their haste to successfully establish the CRCs, all efforts and energy were focused upon the contract share sale, and very limited evidence emerged of any serious planning or risk assessment of the future management of the newly nationalised National Probation Service. With no piloting or credible assessment of what the new work meant or involved, the allocation of budgets and staff was largely guesswork. Initially, the NOMS stated that 70% of work was expected to be transferred to the CRCs, as only around 30% of total clients would be classified as high risk. This was not a scientific experiment, and it quickly became evident that it didn't translate. The staffing split soon became 50-50, with ongoing confusion about where some work should sit. Mr. Chairman, the current staffing levels and reliance on expensive agency staff are simply not sustainable nor value for money for the taxpayer, and a case needs to be made to the Treasury for emergency support for the NPS.
On that point, would my honourable friend...
I will give way.
Can I thank my honourable friend for giving way? Would he agree with me that this sounds all too familiar in terms of privatisations from the led by the party opposite when in government, that we privatise the profits, nationalise the debts, and actually the long-term liabilities to the taxpayer become greater than they had been before?
I would indeed agree with my honourable friend. I think what's very important here is to put a system in place that actually works, and the old maxim, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, does apply. I think we have to absolutely be open to new forms of innovation, working in partnership with both the third sector and the private sector, but that was actually already happening. The new system that's been put in place has unfortunately caused a great deal of confusion, and I hope that today we can make some progress on sorting some of that out. Furthermore, the contracts allow the CRCs to pass back tough cases and still get paid on a fee-for-service basis. A further problem, Mr. Chairman, is around the additional redundancy costs. Recently, the probation unions have had cause to lodge formal disputes with the National Negotiating Council on account of one of the CRC owners, in this case Sodexo, refusing to honour the terms of voluntary redundancy under the National Staff Transfer and Protections Agreement. Staff terms and conditions should be honoured, and the MOJ should be policing this as part of their contract management. I'd now like to turn to the HMIP reports. It is expected that ministers will cite the latest reports from Paul Wilson as evidence that it's too early to form a judgment about TR, and that it will be another 2 to 3 years before the public can see evidence of the effectiveness of these reforms. Whilst not disputing the valuable work of HMIP, we believe that this is a wholly unsatisfactory analysis which will assist this government in their attempts to gloss over the reality which is the failure of TR. I do not believe that we can afford to wait 2 to 3 years for the situation to resolve itself when the consequences of a failing probation service are so critical to public safety. A further vital point, Mr. Chairman, is about transparency. In a letter written by the Undersecretary to the Justice Select Committee, the Minister claims that he is putting measures in place to improve transparency. We fully support the need for the performance of the probation services and the CRCs to be properly monitored and for the results of that monitoring to be made public. As such, we would strongly recommend that private probation providers are made to comply with freedom of information requests so that they too can be openly scrutinised by honourable members and by the public. We also call on the government to place the details of the 21 private contracts in the public domain so that they are open to scrutiny. Finally, Mr. Chairman, I would like to raise serious concerns about service delivery. The MOJ is proposing a reduction in the number of full reports delivered to courts and a greater reliance on oral reports. All reports, by their very nature, do not allow for a full risk assessment to be carried out by probation staff, nor for any information that is held by other agencies to be collected. As such, they should be used on low-level, first-time offences only. However, the push to use these types of reports in the majority of cases will see them being used for wholly inappropriate offences. We are already aware that due to pressures on staff and staff shortages, these reports are being used for sexual and domestic violence offences. These cases are complex and have underlying risk issues that need to be fully investigated prior to sentencing. Children's services and the police should be contacted to see if there are ongoing risks to children and victims. Without this information, it is impossible to manage the case effectively or safely, or to propose the most appropriate sentence to the court. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to close by summarising, therefore, the 7 key recommendations that must now be urgently implemented. First, open engagement between the unions and senior MOJ and NOMS management and stakeholders to identify ways to resolve some of the urgent performance issues arising in the NPS. Second, a full post-implementation review of TR and the contracts and performance of CRC providers since the 1st of February 2015. Third, a properly funded NPS that is sustainable and effective at managing some of the most dangerous offenders. This should include funding for ICT that is fit for purpose. Fourth, effective contract management, including a full analysis of CRC operating models to ensure a safe delivery of service that focuses on public protection and rehabilitation and not just cost-cutting exercises. Fifth, that all CRC owners be made subject to freedom of information requests so that their performance can be scrutinised by MPs and the public. Sixth, robust and fully open contract management to ensure that providers are adhering to staff terms and conditions as underwritten by ministers. And seventh, a mechanism being put in place that will enable those who are made redundant in CRCs to be swiftly able to transfer over to the NPS at the same grade as they were prior to the split. This would not only ensure that skilled staff are not lost to the service, but would also help to reduce the pressures in the NPS caused by staff shortages. Mr. Chairman, a wise person once said that what matters is what works. It's crystal clear to all concerned that the transforming rehabilitation programme that was conceived by the coalition government is simply not working. We on this side of the House are pragmatists, and as such we now urge the Minister and his honourable friends to remove ideology and dogmatism from this matter in order to enable common sense to prevail. We call on the Minister to listen to the experts and to fix this broken system before it's too late.